Good morning. Jennifer DeCaballos, I'm the CEO here at Hennepin Healthcare, and just so honored to join all of you and to see some faces I know, some names I've heard about. There is a legacy here at Hennepin Healthcare, and that incredible organization in this building and across the street is incredible because of the legacy of those who have worked here before us. So honored to be here to meet more of you, to hear from you, and to share where we're going as an organization. The most incredible thing about Hennepin Healthcare that you all know so well is that this is family, that this place isn't just another job. People link arms on a regular basis to get through the highs and the lows, celebrate when we're at the top of our game, link arms and commit to doing better when we're not. And again, that is a culture that those of us that are here now, didn't start. It is a culture that you set and that has been honored generation after generation that has come through Hennepin Healthcare. I have the privilege as CEO to greet new employees. And I always start with my why. Why did I join the organization? For those who don't know, I joined the organization in February of 2020. And if that time frame means anything, yeah, I hear a couple of boos. Within 2 weeks, we were shutting down the healthcare system. Within 4 months, we were responding to the murder of George Floyd. Weeks after, we were responding, and our rigs were in the heat of civil unrest. And these are all stories that I know all of you have as well. Because the criticality of Hennepin Healthcare, who we are, how we show up, and how the entire state, and in many instances the region, rely on us, is critical. So when I start new employee orientation and I say I share my why, I always share my why is I knew when I worked previously over at the county, I knew that it was the hearts and minds here that were so incredible, and I wanted to be a part of it. And I didn't know the half of it. Once I came in, I went, oh, what I saw over there at government wasn't even half of the grit, the commitment, the mission that brings people here and keeps people here. And what I love is new employees right now, what they tell me, because I pass the mic. I share my little story and then I pass the mic and say, you can choose any healthcare system right now. Jobs are posted all over the place. You all had a choice. You chose us. Tell us why. Inevitably, it is, I worked here as a casual, I worked here as a temp, I worked here as agency, and I fell in love with this place. This is my place. These are my people. Or I'm out in community and I'm seeing how you guys show up. And we know it's not just a healthcare system. And I want to be a part of it. Inevitably, those are the stories we hear. So absolutely honored to meet you, to see you here, and so privileged that you've stayed connected as a family to Hennepin Healthcare. Can I ask, can you raise your hand if you are a former team member? All right, welcome. Can you raise your hand if you are a family, a friend, or a loved one of a team member? Because we know these jobs are hard and we rely as much on our family, our friends to help us. And so that is a commitment from you all as loved ones. So absolutely grateful for your commitment to us, for sticking around. Absolutely grateful. Let me call out who is a part of the History Center. Wonderful. You keep that history alive. You're going to hear today we are embarking on the next generation of building a new inpatient tower, creating healing space like you'll see in the outpatient. You're going to hear more about those efforts and how we'd love you to stay engaged as we vision forward for what is the next generation across Hennepin Healthcare. And with that, I will pass on to Mary Ellen Bennett. I think you are well known in this room, let me just say, but 35 years of nursing, 35 years of nursing, leading not just us, but at the state level, across the system, taking care of infection prevention, taking care of our team members, and making sure that nursing is leading the way and continuing to tell our story. So absolutely inspired by the work, the volunteerism, and you all helping us keep our story going into the future. So Mary Ellen, thank you.
So thank you, Jennifer, for the warm, wonderful kickoff to our Here for History event today. And thank you all for coming. We're just blown away that so many people came today to celebrate our 30th year as a History Center at Hennepin Healthcare. Our History Center preserves and shares over a century of hospital history, and our goal is really to provide Hennepin Healthcare with a valued service. The History Center opened in the lower level B building in 1994, and the collecting for the museum really started in 1976. So as you know, most of you know, the move from the old Hennepin County General Hospital to the Hennepin County Medical Center happened in 1976. And after the move, Hilly Prose, who was the director of the emergency department at the time, and Bill Krikus, who was a hospital administrator at the time, went over to the old hospital and walked the halls. And they found lots of documents, and they found pictures and artifacts, and they decided that they needed to be preserved. So they did that. And an example is that we have annual reports dating back to 1902 in our archives. In 2010, the Hennepin Medical History Center, which we were called back then, merged with the Metropolitan Center Museum. And the Metropolitan Medical Museum was collecting the history of Swedish Hospital and St. Barnabas Hospital. And so we combined with them, and we are now calling ourselves a Hennepin Healthcare History Center. So our current work consists of planning for the future, working on digitizing the collections, organizing the galleries, and creating exhibits, both physical and virtual exhibits. And I have been working on a special project, recording oral histories. And so I have been fortunate to do 11 of them so far. And the people who I've interviewed have just been amazing. And so they are posted on our Hennepin Healthcare History Center website. And in order to get to that website, just go to the main Hennepin Healthcare website and go to the bottom, and there's a link there for the Hennepin Healthcare History Center. And you'll find the oral histories there. We have an exciting program planned today on how healthcare grew up in the Elliot Park neighborhood. Tom Hayes, the current VP of Public Relations and Marketing here at Hennepin Healthcare, will be speaking about the history and the future of the Hennepin Healthcare campus. Then Fred Ames and Paul Trudeau, many of you know them. They are directors in our facilities department, and they know this whole campus very, very well, and they're going to be doing walking tours. So we're going to have 2 walking tours. One will be a shorter tour that'll go down to the end of what we now call Shapiro Building, and the second tour will be a little bit longer and more detailed, and that will probably go around Shapiro or what was the old Swedish Hospital, and that will take a little bit longer. So hopefully the rain stays away. If it's raining, they have a plan B, and they'll do it from the inside. And so I want to say too that we have an amazing exhibit out there. So those of you who go on the second tour can go out and look at the exhibit, and those of you who go on the first tour should look at it when you come back. There is a lot of history out there, and I guarantee that you will learn something if you go out and look at all the things that are out there. Also, I want to tell you about a timeline. It's up on second floor, up in that corner. And the timeline was put there when this building was built a few years ago. And it was a combined effort between the History Center and Wenda Bellinger's Inspire Arts program. I'd like to do some acknowledgments this morning to our 11 Hennepin County Healthcare, our Hennepin Healthcare History Center volunteers who staff the galleries and work on special projects. And last year they logged over 1,200 hours. We have 2 ad hoc advisors who have been guiding us for the last year. Kathy Wild, who is over here. She was our VP of Patient Care and our Chief Nursing Officer. and Dr. Gil Hartley, who was a long-term staff physician here, and he heads up the bariatric program. Tom Hayes is he's going to speak after me, and he's been a steadfast supporter and has given us much sage advice for our planning. I want to thank MJ, we call her, Melissa Johnson, and she's here someplace, for her guidance. And also the Hennepin Healthcare Foundation, especially Matt Munoz, who has tirelessly supported our program over the last few years, along with Ellen Sachs. Dr. Megan Walsh is our Chief Academic and Research Officer here at the Healthcare Center. And our History Center was actually slated to close during COVID. And Dr. Megan Walsh said no. She wanted it to stay open. She wanted her medical students and residents to be aware of the men and women who took a small public hospital and made it into what it is today, one of the top hospitals in the country. Tom Madison and Eric Nathanson for their writings on the history and the struggles of this healthcare institution. Without their publications, the history would really be lost. So Tom Madison is here. There he is. And I want to thank Michelle Hagan, who is our curator archivist extraordinaire, for leading the Hennepin Healthcare History Center into the future. We have made amazing strides in the last 3 years. Finally, I would like to thank our generous donors, because we totally rely on philanthropy for every dollar that is donated. It helps us continue our work. In particular, I'd like to recognize one special donor today, and her name is Rondine Mailing. And Rondine was a nurse at Hennepin for 40 years. She was a night nursing supervisor when I started on 22G at the time. And so she was always there for us. And she retired in 2003, and she has been a leader in the History Center ever since. Rondine has collaborated with the Hennepin Healthcare Foundation to start an endowment fund. It is named the Rondine Mailing Endowment for Hennepin Healthcare History Center. So Rondine, will you please stand up? And we want to give you a round of applause and recognize you. She's an amazing lady. So the purpose of this endowment is to secure permanent funding for the Hennepin Healthcare's History Center and make us fully self-funded through the generous philanthropy of our donors. Rondine has made a significant contribution to the endowment, but we still need more support for our ambitious goal. Further details will be shared with you and other History Center supporters not present today in subsequent communications following today's event. If you're interested in participating in the endowment fund or contributing to the History Center's general fund, please talk to our foundation representative, Matt Munoz, and Matt is over there in the corner. The history of Hennepin Healthcare needs to be preserved, and that's why I'm volunteering here at this healthcare institution in their History Center. It really is a special place. This small hospital did so much to advance medicine in the 1960s and 1970s, and it continues right up until today. It is important to keep our rich history alive and collect the history we are making right now so that it is available for future generations. And as I've been doing my oral history interviews, a clear theme runs through them all. And the theme is that Hennepin is a special place with special people and a special mission, and that we're a family here. That's to echo on what Jennifer talked about. It's true, and everybody has said that in my interviews. Again, thank you for coming. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Tom Hayes. He is the Vice President of Public Relations and Marketing, and I've had the honor of working with Tom for many, many years, and he's the best of the best. And he now will talk about the history and the future of the Hennepin Healthcare Campus.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. And it's really intimidating to speak to an audience where the audience knows more about your topic than you do. So feel free to correct me if that's necessary. Um, Sometime during these 200 slides, if I get something wrong, just correct me. So I want to start with this quote: "History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes." And the reason I'm starting with that quote is as you hear about the history and what we're going to do going forward, you're going to see that there's just a lot here that is just the same theme repeating itself, or rhyming, as Mark Twain says. And I'm not a historian, so I'm not going to pretend to be a historian. Mary Ellen already pointed out Tom Madison in our audience, who's written so much about the history of Hennepin, the history of Hennepin, and all of the work that we do in healthcare. Here are a few others that you should know. Eric Nathanson, for sure, who has written along with Tom. Timothy Rumsey, who did the film, the General. David Fields was on the staff of Elliot Park Neighborhood Inc. He wrote extensively about hospitals and healthcare in this neighborhood. Lindbergh Consulting created a report in 2011 that sort of tells the whole story as well, and I'm drawing a lot from that report. And then, of course, there's the History Center that we've heard about already. There's Mill City Museum. There's the Hennepin History Museum and the Digital Library, and Michael Rainville as well has been writing about this area for a long time. So credit goes to them for all of this work. And then Mary Ellen did mention Hilly. I have to show you Hilly and Audrey. If you knew Hilly Prose and Audrey Kuhn, they are the godmothers of trauma for Hennepin Healthcare. We have this world-renowned trauma center. We wouldn't without Hilly and Audrey. And what was fortunate, I think, for us is that the same energy that they brought to building up our trauma program, and with the physicians and everyone else, but they were very much drivers of this. But that same energy that they brought to doing that, when they retired, they turned that energy on preserving our history. And that's part of the reason that we're here today and that we have a history center across the street, because of the work that they put into it, both rescuing artifacts, not just from the old general, but driving around the metro area. I've read accounts of pulling their spouses and others in and driving and rescuing pieces, bringing them here. So they are to be credited. And then Rondine, I had the pleasure of working with Rondine when she was house supervisor here. And I guess Rondine, Hilly, Audrey, and others are proof that when you really need to get something done, you look to the nurses. They're the ones who are going to get it done. So I've got 3 questions I'm going to answer today. Why is Elliot Park the home of so much healthcare that happened in Minneapolis and in the Twin Cities through the years? What is still standing today? What's in the neighborhood today that you can look at that's part of earlier systems? And then what's next for healthcare, or for Hennepin Healthcare? What's next for us? So the story of hospitals starts in the mid-1850s in the Minneapolis area, but I think it's important that we go back and acknowledge that before hospitals, before the development in this area, the Dakota and Ojibwe people were the primary inhabitants of this land, and it was really through a series of treaties that were generally not honored over time, and through violence, that a lot of this land was taken from them and industries were built here. The wealth of the industries, the wealth that was earned for the owners, none of it really went to the indigenous communities who were here before, and they had no decision-making power over the land and did not benefit from those industries. And that's just a fundamental piece of our history, and we need to acknowledge that. 2 of those industries, flour milling and lumber milling, just along the river, kind of answer our second question, which is why Elliot Park? Why is this the home to healthcare? And it's because those mills, and this was before OSHA, it was a little dangerous to work in those mills. So you had industrial accidents, you had just the general living conditions in the mid-1800s, so infectious diseases and things like that. And of course, that just built the natural need for hospitals. And so the first hospital which I'm going to talk about in just a minute. First, I do want to show you the neighborhood. So this is where we are, Elliot Park. Interestingly enough, Elliot Park is named after Dr. Jacob Elliot. So physician, this area is named after Dr. Jacob Elliot. He donated the land, which is the green blotch there in the middle of the map. That's the actual park, Elliot Park, which is just 2 blocks over. It's one of the city's oldest neighborhoods. It was settled by Swedish immigrants primarily at first, and some of the housing plots here date to the 1850s. So it's really worth your time, not just this morning, but when you have time and if you like history, get around in the neighborhood just south of the park itself. You'll see some great homes in that park. If you go over to 9th Street, this is the Rappahannock Flats, which is one of the first apartment buildings built in the city. This was built in 1895, still standing, still full today, and just other beautiful architecture in that area includes those brownstones that you've probably seen all along 9th Street and along Chicago and up in that area. So now back to the hospitals. I talked about the conditions in the mills, the need for a hospital. So it was in 1871 that the pastor of the Protestant Episcopal Church and the Brothers of Gethsemane opened the first hospital right along the river. It was called Cottage Hospital. A couple of years later, it moved to donated land in Elliot Park. And just proof that nothing ever happens without some controversy. The neighbors weren't thrilled that it was moving into Elliot Park, so the patients were moved in the middle of the night. When they woke up the next morning, there it was. In 1893, the name changed to St. Barnabas. So this is the first early history of our hospitals. St. Barnabas continued to grow and expand. This is the pavilion that opened on South 7th Street in 1911. And this now answers the second question, what's still standing today? So this is a great example. This is the pavilion building. Today it's the Barnabas Apartments, and it provides supportive housing for young people who are seeking to achieve their employment, education, and self-sufficiency goals, often coming out of being in unstable housing. So great continuing use for this facility. Of course, attached to it is what was the Whitney Wing, opened in 1937. And this is owned now by North Central University. It's got a lot of trees in front of it, but trust me, it's behind those trees. And then right behind it is the power plant that was built in 1929. It's still standing. Of course, the new St. Barnabas opened in 1958, and that's right across the street. And today is the blue and green buildings, and Fred and Paul will have a lot more to say about those buildings when they take us on the tour. So another health system that started in this neighborhood, Asbury Hospital, it opened on 9th Avenue and 6th Street. And then in 1899, they started raising funds for this building, which opened over about a 10-year period from 1906 to 1916. This is on Elliott Avenue, just to our east. And today, this is Miller Hall. So the building still stands, very much in use by North Central University, directly across the soccer fields to the east. Just south of those same soccer fields is the library for North Central University. This was the Turtle Lot Memorial Home for the deaconesses of Asbury. And, pardon me while I switch pages, right to the attached to the rear of this building is the also Asbury Hospital, first used as a nursing dorm, and then in 1928 this was remodeled to become the new Asbury Hospital. Again, still standing right there on 902 East 15th Street. Today it's called Carlson Hall, part of North Central University, and this was Asbury Hospital from 1928 until 1959, when it moved to St. Louis Park, and today you'd know that as Methodist Hospital. So the roots of Methodist Hospital right here in this neighborhood, and continues going strong today in St. Louis Park. So then there's Swedish Hospital. Started in about on 19th Street, the 1400 block of 19th Street, and then moved closer and closer, and eventually in 1928, the cornerstone was laid for this building at 914 8th Street. And again, today this is known as the Shapiro Building. This is where I work. This has administrative offices for Hennepin Healthcare. It also has research labs. And on the first floor, it has clinics for about 4 or 5 clinics. Our psychiatry clinic is in that building, our infectious disease clinic, and still very active, very fully used today. And then we get to City Hospital. So you, again, know more probably about the history of City Hospital than I will share, but started in this rented house on 11th Avenue, just a couple of blocks to the east of us. And then it moved to Brackett's Farm, which is just, you know where Commons Park is, right in front of the US Bank Stadium. Brackett's Farm is about where the Juvenile Justice Center and the Health Services building is today. And that whole block, and I think some of you worked in this, some of these buildings, and this was the complex that became known as the Hennepin County General Hospital. And this really thrived on that property until 1976. So really for most of the 1900s, General Hospital is where Hennepin lived. And then in the 1976 rather, moved into the new hospital that we know today as the red and purple buildings right across the street from us. And that was connected across Chicago Avenue to Metropolitan Medical Center, which grew out of the mergers of St. Barnabas and Swedish. And this was really a great partnership, kind of a national model of a partnership of shared services between HCMC and MMC for a number of about 30 services, including cardiac, toxicology, perinatal services, laundry, food services. In 1988, MMC merged with Mount Sinai to form Metropolitan Mount Sinai, which operated until 1991. Then the buildings were sold to HCMC. And these and other closures led to HCMC essentially standing alone downtown as the surviving healthcare system downtown. So I'm going to talk mostly about physical facilities. So I'm going to jump way ahead to 2016, when what I would call really the first phase of the first evidence of our next phase of what we're doing on this campus started. And that's with the building of the building that we're in today, the Clinic and Specialty Center. So this opened in March of 2018, so just a little over 5 years old. We've got we took 40 primary care and specialty care clinics that were spread across the campus. Not that convenient for patients, not that convenient for people who worked in these clinics, because you could go blocks between clinics if you had multiple visits. Combined them all and opened essentially 26 clinics in this building. And you'll find centers like our TBI center, our heart center, our cancer center. You'll find an adult and pediatric physical therapy gym. There's a pharmacy, really everything a patient would need in one place for outpatient care. Very convenient for the patient. They can drive right up front or park underneath and go upstairs. It's also hard to get lost in this building, which is great compared to the other campus where wayfinding can be kind of a challenge. Now, last week in the Star Tribune, there was a column by James Lilacs where he described this building. Well, he wrote about the architecture. He saw a rendering for the proposed new parking ramp. So he wrote about the architecture on this campus. And James is no fan of the architecture of the building across the street from us. I'm going to read a quote from you. This is what he said. This is what he said about the Clinic and Specialty Center, and he got his dig in on the building across the street. He said, quote, "It serves as a complete rebuke to the original structure," referencing the red and purple buildings. "It faces HCMC's Soviet facade with a clean and pleasing blue glass wall, curving like the swirl of a skirt, or hospital gown if you like, transparent and inviting. Everything about it connotes peace and relief." So I guess he likes the design. Now I'm going to talk about the future. And if you worked in the red or purple building, especially on the inpatient side, and you went back over there now, I think a lot of it would look very familiar to you. There's been the intensive care units about 12 years ago moved into new ICUs, state-of-the-art, beautiful facilities. But the core inpatient areas, 5 medicine, and then the units over in the orange building as well, are really locked in by the physical structure, room size, long hallways. 5 medicine goes from 8th Street to 6th Street. So something needs to be done, right? Something needs to be done for inpatients. And so in 2019, we kicked off the phase that we're now in of strategic planning and work on the campus plan. And you can see the dates go out some years, go out to probably late 2020s, early 2030s. And that's okay. That's the kind of time that it takes to do these projects, as we've seen in the history of healthcare projects downtown. Right now, in 2024, you can see where the pin is. It's on something called clinical redesign. So just 2 slides to tell you a little bit about that work. There are 3 phases of the clinical redesign work that we're in right now. 3 phases happening currently. There's the clinical program strategies. That's evaluating the services that we deliver today. What do those services need to look like for the future? There's the site of care. What would a building need to have in it and look like? Using that other work, the clinical strategy work, to inform what is a building, how big does a building need to be, what services does it need to have. And then there's the third piece of work that's happening today, which is integrating technology, data, and analytics into the way we serve patients. I want to talk just a little bit more about that because that's happening right now, and the benefits of that is going to happen right now. So it may be a few years until we see the walls going up, but the benefits of the work that we're doing on the digital front door can happen right away. That's things like improving our scheduling online, improving our telehealth, improving our website, and doing things like making MyChart, offering Spanish language MyChart, and adding digital diagnostics and other triage tools online. It's kind of where healthcare is going. We're going there too, and you'll start to see that in the next, really in the next 12 months. You're going to start to see things change in that way and how you interact with our system. All right, so now to talk a little bit about kind of the physical building and buildings and the changes that are coming. This is our campus. So if you were overhead in an airplane, this is how you would look down on the current campus. As I mentioned, it's kind of this cobbled together set of buildings right here. Red and purple, orange, green, blue, Shapiro, that are challenging and expensive to operate because you've got systems between these buildings that don't all connect very well. Just ask Fred or Paul about that. They've retired in recent years, and I asked them a couple of weeks ago if they've stopped waking up in the middle of the night with the thought of a pipe burst or electrical system, and I think you said neither of you have stopped waking up in the middle of the night. Yes. Exactly. Every time they hear thunder, they wake up and worry about the building. So, and it's really expensive. It's also, for the state of Minnesota, it's also a concern because the way hospitals are today, there are just about enough beds for the need in the state of Minnesota. Very tight. So you take a few beds offline, especially at a major trauma center like Hennepin, and you've disrupted the healthcare system. And it only takes one pipe to burst on an upper floor, and you've taken rooms out of service. And we've had that happen countless times in the last couple of years. So clearly it's time to do something different on this campus, to build a new inpatient facility. The future vision, I want to get my little arrow here, the future vision is to build an inpatient building here. This is right across Chicago Avenue. This is where that beautiful parking ramp is, the hospital parking ramp, and the Parkside building. So those are now owned by Hennepin County, and the future would have a new inpatient facility, inpatient building going up on that block. But first, you have to have someplace to park those 1,000 cars that park there every day. So it's the south replacement ramp concept that Hennepin County is working on right now. And this is an image of that parking ramp. The good news is this can be built on that surface parking lot to the south of us. Doesn't take any housing, doesn't take any buildings. It goes right kind of in the open lot there, and it provides that parking for those 1,000 cars. And then it allows work to begin on the block next to us to the east. And that work could be, here's just a very early concept, so things change, but this is if you were standing, let's say you were standing in front of the Shapiro building, looking to the east, across from the soccer field, this is what you could see. You could see an inpatient building on that block. Again, very compact, state of the art, of course, single rooms large enough for interpreters, for learning, teaching teams to be in the room, just everything we would want for our patients. So speaking of patience, the other use of the word patience, it takes patience to do a project like this. These are headlines from a few years ago. So Monette Johnson, who's here, left, she preceded me in the job that I'm in now. And one of the things she left me was about a 4-inch thick 3-ring binder full of newspaper articles about building projects. From the first article is from 1911. And it runs all the way. I've been putting articles in it now on the work that we're doing. So, and these are some headlines. A General Hospital future argued, hearing favors a new building. But guess what year that headline was? 1938. Board to study need for a new hospital. 1946. General Hospital, first-rate care in a rundown and dismal building. 1952. So this is what was being said in the media in the 1930s, 40s, 50s. Think about it. It was 1976 when that building opened across the street. So a lot of newspaper ink was spilled on this topic. A lot of intense political discussions between the city and the county. And frankly, it was the Service League. So the Service League, that is really the base of the museum and all this work, was a real driver of the campaign for a new general hospital. In 1969, that included a referendum for funding, $25 million. And then 2 years later, a second referendum for the rest of the money they needed actually failed. And some county commissioners at the time opposed that public referendum. So I just say that to tell you that politics are politics. There can be disagreements, but you can still get things done. Funding was secured, obviously. The building opened a few years later, and just further evidence that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. So I want to close with, as we're sitting here this morning, we might think, well, what can we do about this? Well, first, I think Jennifer would take a $1 billion check if anybody's able to write that. So that's the first thing we could do. But more realistic, what can we do? In the next legislative session, they'll probably have a bill in front of them to take the Minnesota Twins stadium tax that will expire in the end of next year, I believe, to repurpose that tax to fund healthcare facilities in Hennepin County. So suddenly we would have this stream of funding funded by people from across the state who come downtown and come to Minneapolis and spend money to use on future facilities. So one thing you can do, if there's a legislative candidate who knocks on your door in the next 45 days for some reason, and they ask what's on your mind, you could speak up for the stadium tax being repurposed for healthcare, because that will need to be decided by the state legislature in the next session, and then would become a reality as of next year. So that's an immediate thing that we can do and to support Hennepin Healthcare. So I'm very confident about the future of Hennepin Healthcare and the future of building on this campus. I'm confident about it because people like Jennifer, like Wendy Stulak-Motzel, who's here as well, who's driving this project for us, are good, smart people. So I'm confident that they'll be able to continue to push it forward. But I'm most confident because this project is about equity, it's about community, and it's about exceptional care, things that are in the hearts of the people, the 7,000 people who work in this healthcare system. And I know they were in your hearts as you worked in this healthcare system through the years. So thank you for coming out on this now clear Saturday morning. Please stick around and join Fred and Paul on the tour because there's more to learn. So thank you.
And the good part was we had the expertise to understand how it's built from the ground up, old and new, and make it all work. So
Terrific. Well, let's go head out. What we're gonna do today is go down 8th Street, down to the old 10th Avenue, turn around and come up 7th Street so that we can look at the old St. Barnabas Hospital over there, and try to beat the rain. So.
Like it, if I had the camera out, I would have got the picture of it. We're starting.
We pushed the rain to the north.
I really appreciate that.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Back, of course, in the 70s, there was a lot of building going on. This, what they used to call the north and south block of this campus was built. It started in 73 and it opened up in 76. At the same time, Metropolitan Medical Center, they were expanding. They were building off of the orange building and adding on to the green building. So at that time, they came up with an agreement that Tom talked a little bit about, is merged services. And a lot of those services were in the crossover over Chicago. And then there were some in the orange building over here. Fred and I being in facilities, there were areas that we took care of. There were areas that the Hennepin County facility team took care of. As that all developed through here in that campus, as we know, in 1991, Alina sold the building to Hennepin County, and Hennepin County expanded their services into that east side of the campus. Prior to that, if you look at going back into the 50s, when St. Barnabas built their hospital here, it was basically just up to the 5th floor, which you can see today, where the colors of the brick are different. Barnabas pretty much took care of everything from up to the 5th floor and over to the 2nd floor here of the orange building, kind of flowed out towards Chicago. And then at that time, the blue building was not there. You had the Swedish Hospital next door. Fred's going to talk a little bit about that once we get down there. But when Metropolitan Medical Center came together, they created what they called the combined facility building, the blue building, which brought the Swedish Hospital with the Barnabas Hospital, creating Metropolitan Medical Center today. We do have, there was a question on the previous tour. Do we have, how many helipads do we have? 2. We still have the one in the parking ramp that was put in back in 1986. And then later on, 2012, 2014, we built one over here in the red building, which is a lot more convenient, quicker response times for the patients, being able to get in there versus the old one at the ramp. They would have to come down into an ambulance, be transported over and in. The parking ramp will go away. The old Parkside building will go away. They'll have all their services will be in the bed tower, and the parking ramp will be just south of the CSC here. As we look at, kind of focus over here on what they used to call the east side of the campus, you can see by looking at the buildings here where the original St. Barnabas building was, because at one time when they first built it was only 5 stories high. So you can see the mismatch in brick there a little bit of where it started and where it stopped. So that was back in the 50s that they built St. Barnabas. They in the 1928 they built the Swedish. And as we start to walk down, you'll see the blue building that connected them back in the late 1960s to make Metropolitan Medical Center. There was a lot of developing going on in the 70s. You had the red and purple building in started in 1973, building what they called the North and South Block back then. And then Tom talked a little bit about the shared services that Hennepin County had with Metropolitan. And a lot of those services were there in what we call the orange building today and the red building crossover on Chicago Avenue. And he listed a few of those services that were shared. And Fred and I took care of a lot of those services in the orange building. At the same time they were building North and South Block, red and purple, that orange building, or what back then what they called the A building, was being developed. The St. Barnabas Hospital did creep over here onto the lower level in the first floor and the second floor. So they basically added from the third floor on up at the same time that they were adding 6, 7, and 8 onto what we called the B building, which is now the green building. Shapiro building, once we get down there, I'm going to let Fred talk a little more of that. There were several different additions put onto that Shapiro building too. We bought the parking ramp and we bought the Parkside building about 2 years ago. So that's all owned by Hennepin County. Okay. Yes. Now, Fred will point out the Shapiro building and talk a little bit about the Methodist Hospital and where that was.
So back to the Metropolitan Medical Office
Fred,
building.
Maybe crank up a little.
That was MMOB, Metropolitan Medical Office Building at the beginning. And it is a 1961 vintage building with its parking ramp, the old parking ramp. Well, the next building was built 1985 and its associated parking ramp. So there's 2 builds there. And then, if you remember in the slideshow, the Asbury Hospital and Methodist, those buildings are still standing too across the park and in use by North Central University, and those buildings over there, that tall building with the columns in front, and then the red brick building behind it, are all about 1916, still being used. A little side note we used to giggle about, remember Jim and Tammy Faye Baker? They met when this was called North Central Bible College. They met here. So we thought that was kind of a fun.
So is this still the North Central Bible College?
North Central University now. Oh. Yep. And they also bought the Mensing, we called it the Kidney House, but before that it was the Whitney Dormitory. They bought that as one of their dormitories and raised it, renovated it, and modernized it. Shapiro building, the old Swedish hospital, was built in 1928. That was the main entrance. It's beautiful inside. If you open up the sheetrock walls and lift the ceiling and tear the carpet up, the terrazzo floor is still there from the 20s. The plaster crown molding is still around all the ceiling. It's just... Well, the first floor is behavioral health. Admin is part of it, and then the clinics. The behavioral health clinics. Is this still the diabetes clinic over here?
Yes, it is, and coordinated care is in there, and then...
Did they move? Okay, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Coordinated care is in there.
Addiction medicine, yep. And then there's levels of research. What maybe you remember the RKDP, Regional Kidney Dialysis or Disease Program. That's now DaVita. And there was something in between there. The HHRI now is what they're known as. It used to be the Metropolitan Medical MMRF Research Foundation, HHRI now, Hennepin Health Research Foundation. And has 3 levels below ground. There's the regular basement that you may have walked through at some time. But then below that is mechanical spaces that we know well because that's where our electrical systems are. Our cooling systems for the building are down there. And then there's yet another floor below that. That was an old coal-fired power plant or boiler room down there, generating steam for heating and sanitizing. When I came here, most of these windows were a window you could open with a screen. And the surgery center, one-day surgery, was on the north wing, 6th floor. You could still open the windows,
Copper
big old
screens,
wooden windows
old
in the
copper
OR.
screens.
Yeah,
And I started here in '86. They were still doing surgeries up there, with the old suites up there.
across 10th Avenue was an earlier build of the Swedish Hospital, and there was a few buildings there. One most recently, before it was torn down, was referred to as the B, like Bravo, B building. And there's still a tunnel that goes out of the lower level of the Shapiro building under 10th Avenue a ways and then dead ends. That went to the B building, and it was for transport back and forth and steam and utilities going over there.
In the early 70s, that was the radiology dorm.
Right. I think they built that first floor addition for radiology. That's how it looks to us. When we look at all the plumbing and electrical, there's a lot of reference to x-ray machines that were over there. There was areas that we knew were film processors. We could tell it was an x-ray area. None of that was there when I began in 1978. It was all admin for MMC. On the 4th floor was a kidney dialysis unit, and it was the early days of dialysis. And those poor patients, they'd sit in that chair for hours and hours and hours receiving dialysis. Well, luckily for them, they lived in an area that had a wonderful program, and one of the pioneers was Fred Shapiro, a nephrologist. And he was leading a tour of other nephrologists around to look at their installation one day. A fun story of Fred Shapiro. They were doing dialysis patients 24 hours a day. And one of the other visiting docs said, "Why do you do 24-hour dialysis?" And he said, "Well, I pay rent 24 hours a day. I'm going to use the facility 24 hours a day." But they were pioneers, and their work, their hard work, modernized kidney disease and dialysis for many people in the area. And there's a huge problem now with dialysis. Well, it's much better than it used to be. Their quality of life is much better. The transplant program was here, kidney transplant. There was a lot of that centered here.
Well, I believe Fred Shapiro was very influential in Washington, D.C. at that level, political level.
It does not surprise me. I know he had separate entities where he joined with other partners to make machinery and dialysis chemistry to make that happen. I was telling someone earlier that part of the group that when they built the link between St. Barnabas and Swedish Hospital, they built the light or dark colored brown brick. They built that over 9th Avenue. That used to be a through street. And they built that link over it, and everything that's under the streets here today, gas lines, water lines, sewer lines, whatever there is still under that street. And if you're in the basement of that building, there's huge trap doors. You open them up, and there's ladders down to the level where all those pipes are.
So yeah, fun story for that is, that was really interesting is all the years that I know Fred worked here, I worked here, we've never been in that tunnel ever. I mean, we've heard rumors of it, we've heard different things about it, but no one had ever been in there. And then all of a sudden, the city of Minneapolis came one day and said, "You've got that courtyard in the blue building. All the storm sewers in there from the rainwater is going into our sanitary line, and we want to separate it and move it over into the storm sewer line." Oh, okay. Well, how are you going to do that? The lines are in that tunnel. We need to get down there in that tunnel. And so there was a lot of planning involved with that because no one had ever been down in there. We don't know, is it an old tunnel with dirt wall? What is this tunnel? So we had, we hired a company to come in to specialize in tight spaces to monitor the air. We don't know what the air quality was like down there. We got the hatch open. They went down there. It turned out everything was fine down there. We had a crew come down there and clean the flooring. There was some water down there. All concrete structure. Had to have been what, Fred? 8-10 feet wide.
Yeah, they did a
Six,
very
7
nice
feet
job.
high. And that thing went all the way from 7th Street all the way out here to 8th. And light bulbs still, I think they turned the lights on and 1 or 2 still came on. This was, 30, 40 years later.
Oh my God.
And if you look over kind of by where that planter, it's covered up, there's a drain behind the second planter, but there's pumps in there in that ramp where you drive up, and they put a whole new system in where they took that water that was going into the courtyard and they brought it out into the street here into the regular storm line water sewer. And it was just really interesting to be down there and think, they put all this in back in the 1960s, and they shut that trap door. And until somebody came by, when was that? Around 2012, 14. Right. Nobody had ever been down there. Right. So
Didn't
that was kind of a fun thing.
You had mentioned the pool that you used to bring your patients to. See the
louvers?
The louvers to the left of that tall rectangular light colored concrete. That's where the pool was.
Okay.
That's been all leveled up there. The people that built the pool did something else. They put the whole electrical system for the building beneath the pool. Well, the pool leaked.
Pools never leak, right?
The pool leaked. And when the pool would leak, it would drip chlorinated water on electrical gear, a lot of it copper, turning everything green. Well, they started building roofs down there, covering equipment. That was not a good situation for a hospital to be in.
What's that? When I started my career in '86, it was still dorms for the nurses. They were just starting to phase out, but that's originally what this was the dorms, nursing dorms,
right?
And and Fred will talk a little bit about it, but you see the entrances that are now planters, and those were doors coming up into the dorm area, and it was wide open, beautiful. Wood floors, the architecture was beautiful. They had a huge fireplace right in the middle as you came in. And it just, it's been gutted and remodeled. It was sad to see that happen because one morning, we were notified they were here to do work, and they drove bobcats right up inside there and just started knocking walls down.
Right.
So a lot of that is gone now. I'll let Fred talk about the nursing part, but what I do know, I had one question someone asked, what is it now? Well, we had offices in there. HR used to be in there, a couple of different research teams for ortho. Doctors, I believe, owned it, correct, Fred?
Right.
At one time, right. And it was recently sold off to a management company, building management company, and they're supposed to be starting here in the next month on gutting it for low-income housing, apartments and low-income housing. So that's this used to be 3 buildings, U-shaped buildings, and then there was kind of a patio, grassy area in the middle, and then they remodeled it in 85, was it? Where they put the beautiful atrium in the center there. So they did a lot of work. It looked real nice, but yeah, a lot of that's going to change now that they're changing it to apartments again.
So as Paul was saying, this was the facade. Unfortunately, you can't see it, but I think it says Swedish Nurses Home or Nurses Home Swedish Hospital.
Yeah, it's on the very top.
It's on the very top. It's in the marquee, if you will, up there. But they had their own entrances. There was a swimming pool that the nurses could swim in the lower level right here. Did anybody remember that?
I think it says
I'd seen pictures of it in the History Center. There was a pool there. And then we took care of this building for some time. And we did a demolition down there. There was an area down there called Ask-A-Nurse. Do you remember the Ask-A-Nurse program? You could call up and talk to a real live nurse and try to get
That's where we're today, right? We've gone circle from Ask a Nurse, which started out all the way to Virtual, right?
Right.
And that's what started was, I want to talk to a nurse. Great. You know, this was Alina. Alina offices originated in here, and Alina started as
Health One.
Health One. Thank you, Health One. And then Health One was kind of their startup, and then developed into Alina. And when Alina, before they were really expanding out, their main corporate headquarters were in this building.
Right.
Yeah.
So in '85, so there are three.
Health One. Health One.
There are three distinct buildings here, and we knew it mechanically. It was actually a tangled up mess. It was all steam heated, no air conditioning really to speak of. And, you know, we've become so dependent on cooling, especially. You know, steam radiators will keep you warm. They're not the best thing on earth, but cooling, can you imagine the Swedish hospital, no air conditioning. It's a hot summer. You're laying in a patient bed. All you've got is the open window and maybe some ice water, but maybe it's got ice in it. But all of that had to be manufactured somewhere. You know, many, many hundreds of pounds of ice or whatever. Then they started to modernize a little bit. But in '85, this entire three building complex was gutted and remodeled, and it wasn't done as well as it possibly could be ventilation wise. We were always over here. That's
Whitney.
the Whitney residence. Then it became the Beth Mincing Kidney House,
Mm-hmm.
and that was another Fred Shapiro combination with I think the one of the kidney foundations. And for $6 a night, a kidney transplant patient could stay there. There was such a thriving program here of transplantation, they needed something nearby for the patients to make it feasible. And in inclement weather, all of these buildings are connected by tunnel, big wide tunnels. And you could push a wheelchair, a gurney, a small truck through there if you needed to. But my in-laws, my father-in-law had kidney disease. He came through this program, and he stayed there for $6 a night before and after he received his kidney transplant. Behind that ramp is a strutware knitting factory. Huge, in the '30s, huge.
Like a Munsingware kind of a thing.
Right, yeah, huge history was made there with unions in Minneapolis at that facility. So you can see the yellow brick is all the Whitney dormitory.
Oh, this is Mensing. Okay.
Yep, and then the red brick is an addition probably done in the '50s. It's a big auditorium area.
Oh. So where's the Beth Mensing?
That was Beth Mincing, and you can still see Mincing. Beth Mincing Kidney House, that's what that was.
Yeah.
In my time, both were dormitories for nursing students. Now they're dormitories for college students. That pavilion building has survived, you know,
That
100+ years, still there, still viable, recently remodeled. I remember walking around in the pavilion building. We're up on the top floor and we went into a room. The plaster ceiling was all falling in, and there's tree roots. We could see tree roots in the ceiling. Went up on the roof and there's a tree about that big growing just fine. So the building was in disrepair. Another weekend, middle of the night call, pavilion building's full of water. And
oh boy, and was it?
A water main broke that went into the building. It broke inside the building. No one was taking care of it. Did Alina own it?
It was owned by Alina at the time, but no one was in there.
No one was taking care of it. The water main burst, 6-inch water main for the sprinkler system, and filled the whole first floor with water.
History, so I have to be careful.
St. Barnabas Pavilion Building.
Yeah.
Hello there. That was a 2-stall ambulance entrance, and there was an emergency room. MMC's emergency room was right there. We had our own emergency room.
Here.
This was, yes, we'll see the date on the church. I think that church was here for a lot of this history.
Yeah.